Well, hello, friends. It is Uncivil Law. I hope you're having just a fantastic Wednesday, as always. And we are here with our midweek law story roundup with your friend and mine, the great, the one, the only, Nate the lawyer. Woo!
Boom.
Boom.
How it is tonight. How you doing, my brother? How are you doing on this Christmas Eve?
Yes, I hadn't thought about that, but yes, you are correct. It is Christmas Eve. Yes. Unless you're Orthodox and your Christmas doesn't come for a couple more weeks, but that's another problem.
What's going on? What's going on to my people in the chat?
I don't know. Well, Emily's competing with us right now. I have to say, she had a apparently desire to stream, so she decided to go live at exactly the same time we did. So we are being disrespected.
Well, hey, I know she going over the motion, the response to the motion to dismiss.
Yes, which apparently isn't uploaded to Pacer, so she's trying to buy time and waiting for that to happen.
Well, listen, it's going to be something good. I don't even want to talk about that lawsuit because I still don't understand how that motion to dismiss could be so horrible. It was like so bad.
It had some minor issues, some drafting problems that could have been corrected, and some
like going over the page,
some oversights of the principal cause of action, and some minor details like that. Nothing that we can't look past. Right? Caused me to bang my head against the wall twice.
Oh yeah. At least you got two out of you. Like for me, I'm reading through the thing. I'm like, my God, this is like fucking unbelievable. Literally, it's unbelievable. But what can you say? A lawyer wrote it, right? A person who has a law degree wrote that.
There does seem to be some dispute over that, of whether or not a lawyer really wrote it or not. Now, I do think it was written by a lawyer because it reads like it was written by a lawyer because it has a certain style to it that.
But you leave out the main cause of action, though, brother. The main cause of action you leave out in a defamation case.
I'd be more likely to leave out the jurisdictional issue than I would to leave out the main cause of action the way I'd write it. I'd be more likely to forget the jurisdiction issue and get right to the merits. That's how I would write it.
Yeah. And then you talk about the ancillary. Listen, if it was a lawyer who wrote it, that lawyer needs to probably come back to law school or should at least got a treatise on defamation because that was.
Yeah, I know. Well, we have got a whole number of legal and legal adjacent stories for you today. So Nate has not seen any of these because he was traveling and such. And so we're just going to start and get Nate's reaction and discuss whatever it is that we're discussing. So we will start with how can I make this any bigger? No. How do I make this bigger on screen? I don't, do I? It's just the size it is, do I?
No.
Do I make it wider?
Yeah, but
look at that.
Just go to the view, just up the view. Yeah.
There you go. All right. So Trump, perhaps unsurprisingly, or perhaps surprisingly, because we don't know what to expect these days, has actually vetoed the $740 billion defense bill. Now, he said that he was going to veto this if they didn't give him CDA 230 repeal. Yeah. And I don't know if that's the reason or not, but he has, in fact, vetoed the Defense Reauthorization Act, the National Defense Authorization Act. So we have no military budget. So that's super exciting.
Well,
so
I think it's important to let people understand how important the Reauthorization Act is. Yeah. Constitutionally, the military has to be funded every 2 years by Congress. They have to pass a bill to fund the military every 2 years. If they do not do that, the military stops getting funded. It's a stopgap so we don't have military rule over the United States. So go ahead. Am I correct, Kurt? Or
you are correct. You are absolutely correct, sir. So this is a bit of a problem. So we have vetoed this $740 billion bill. First of all, that's a lot. We'll just take note of it's a big number, although that's not horribly out of line with our defense spending as of late, which may be a problem unto itself because we're spending $750 billion on defense spending. That is a lot. And last time I checked, although it's been a while, it's more than the next. How many countries combined?
It's 20 combined. 20.
It's a lot. It's a big number.
That's including Russia, China, all these other things. But don't forget, though, we are the military of a lot of different countries, right? We're the military of South Korea, for instance, right?
Which might be a sore point, but yes, we are in fact those things, for better or worse. And but it is what it is for better or worse. But President Donald Trump on Wednesday vetoed the sweeping defense bill that authorizes a top line of $740 billion in spending outlays. Unfortunately, the act fails to include critical national security members, includes provisions that fail to respect our veterans and military history, and contradicts efforts by my administration to put America first in international security and foreign policy implications, Trump wrote in a statement to Congress. And then he said it's a gift to China and Russia, the defense bill, presumably, rather than the veto thereof being a thing. And it said, and then it does take note here that it has passed with a veto-proof majority. So one will imagine that Congress will just turn right around and repeal to pass into law directly. But that's a thing that happened today, which was not entirely expected.
Yeah, but the thing is that when it comes to, listen, the one thing that Democrats and Republicans both like to get into is that when it comes to defense spending, that bill is going to pass, right? It's not happening. That bill is going to pass. So it's nice that he stood up for something. He said, I'm gonna veto it, but it's that's an easy override. It's even the craziest Trump supporting Republicans can't go back home and say we veto, because
we vetoed defense funding. It'd be fun. It'd be fun to watch the Democrats vote against it, just to see if it's like we don't like defense funding. That'd be funny.
Yeah, but it's going to be hard for a ruby red Republican to go back home and say, yeah, I voted against giving our soldiers raises in the defense. But that's what we do. That's what
not raises, mind you, pay of any kind.
Pay of any kind. Yeah,
that's right.
2 years. Yeah.
We have no money. We have no money to feed them because we have no money to house them. We have no money to pay them. We have no money to ship them anywhere, to ship them things, to buy things to ship to them,
to bring them home.
We have no money to operate the planes, no money to operate the bases. It's just a minor problem.
And if there's any ass we need to kick, there's no money to do that either.
Well, I don't know. I guess we can already use the bullets in stock, but that's about it. Hopefully the troops that are needing to kick ass are already where they need to be, since we can't ship them anywhere. But if they're already there, I guess we can go forth with the weapons they have. So yeah, we'll get you back, Kay, on that one.
Yeah, but I don't know. What do you think is why? Well, he's done this to a couple of bills. I'm assuming you bring up the other bills too, but
well, he's threatened it on the omnibus. I don't know if he's actually done it. I don't think he's actually done it yet, but he threatened it on the big omnibus that includes all kinds of a $900 billion omnibus with all kinds of weird stuff in it, including gender studies in Pakistan for some reason.
That I understand. That's because I think the $600 I think the $600 thing, giving people $600, I think is ridiculous. After like 6-7 months without no job, now you're gonna give them $600 like they're crackheads. Come on, you can do better than that. But I'm trying to figure out, why do you think because he usually doesn't veto these bills, especially ones like this last bill, the omnibus bill, and even the defense spending bill. He said to everybody that he was good with them, right? It was like, they were good, I'm going to sign them, and then they get to his desk and he's like, veto. Like, what the hell's going on with this guy?
I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to be a pain in the butt for no other reason. Maybe it's a spite thing. We could go with spite. That's a good motivation.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Who's he spiting against? The people who voted against him?
That would be correct.
Yeah,
that'd be the spite against the American people. Yes.
I don't know. Now we're going to lose some subscribers, because as soon as you say Trump did a bad thing, that's like, half the subscriber base is gone right now.
Not everything Trump does can necessarily be good, can it? I mean, it can't be walking on water, can it? Some things maybe he does are not good.
Listen.
No,
I was arguing that Trump.
I'm sorry. What I meant to say was everything Trump does is great, and this is truly a genius move. And those who can't appreciate it really don't understand the full manifestations of his genius.
It's wild, because like today I was talking to a friend of mine who supports the president. So we were talking about him, rejecting the $600. So we're all together. Yay, my God, it's a good thing. But then we came to the whole election fraud thing, and it was like, this. I'm like, what? How'd we get so far apart here? It's crazy. But go ahead, read the super chat.
Did I see the Nevada charter school lawsuit over critical race theory? I did not. Clark versus Democracy Prep. Colin Wright has it on Twitter. Well, I'm definitely going to have to get a piece of that, because that definitely sounds like something I want to cover. So if any of my mods happen to be here in chat, and I'm not sure they are, But if any of them are, if they could tag me on Discord with the appropriate link or something, so I can make sure to cover that. I definitely want to put that in my recording queue because that definitely sounds like something I want a piece of. So,
hey, well, I'm sure you heard about Linwood getting on this. Is that on the list?
It is not actually on the list because I couldn't find anything really great about it, but I don't mind talking about it. So yeah, Linwood. Oh, well, give me the link.
Oh, hold on. I'll send it to you right now. Damn, you should have told me, man. I have the it's crazy too. I think both him and Sydney are going to get
Well, you saw Linwood is now representing Sydney, right? You saw that one, right?
Yeah, but he's right now they're talking about disbarring him.
Yeah, I think we're a lot of steps from that. I know that Delaware wants a piece of him for his pro hoc vice, but I think we're a lot of steps from being disbarred. But whatever, yeah.
Well, no, but you know how it works, right? If they bang you in one jurisdiction, that travels to your jurisdiction. Well, that's how it is here. So if I get banged in California, I get banged here.
What I understand is going on. Maybe the article will correct me, but what I understand is going on is that he was admitted on a pro hoc vice status in Delaware, and Delaware wants to revoke his pro hoc vice on the basis that he's not playing nice with others. So I don't think that really covers as a sanction that has to be reported anywhere because being admitted is technically because if being admitted to a pro hoc vice is as a one-time thing, and they say, "Oh, we don't need to be pro hoc vice anymore," I don't think that really counts as a penalty that gets reported.
Oh no. Let me send it to you because they're hitting them for incompetence, not candor to the tribunal. They're hitting them with serious stuff. This is not like you just can't pro hoc vice. They're hitting them with real professional conduct stuff. So
okay,
yeah, it's
maybe I'm not fully understanding the full manifestation of the Linwood trauma.
Let me send you
that too.
Oh, what do you want me to send it to you? Want me to send it to you on Twitter?
Send it to me on YouTube. You have mod permissions to send a link.
Oh, I have it.
Send it in. Just send it in general chat in StreamYard or something.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I'll put it in private so you can share it. All right, it's in private chat. Here's the link. It's on Twitter. So, and just click the link and you'll see it, and you can just pull it up. It's a 4-pager.
All right, hold on.
I'm actually going to do it. I was going to do a video on it, but we can look at it here too.
Linwood, call your office. That's a nice little thing. Poor Linwood. We feel bad for our fellow attorneys over here. So Linwood is being dragooned before let's see what's going on. So yeah, this is State Court of Delaware. Rule to show cause, sua sponte, showing cause, why permission to practice in this case. Yeah, so that's pro hoc vice, is permission to practice in this case. So why that pro hoc vice should be revoked.
Hit the close on the cookie.
I understand. And appearing in this court, engage in other jurisdictions which occurred in Delaware would violate, engage in conduct that had it occurred in Delaware would violate. So he's saying, the judge is saying, we think you may violate the rules elsewhere. And then filing false affidavits would violate these rules and some other stuff.
Incompetence.
Yeah, a whole bunch of stuff. But here's maybe where I'm not fully understanding the full implications of this, because the original thing that's starting all this is a grant of pro hoc vice. So for those of you who are not familiar with these terms, if you're a lawyer anywhere, you can ask for what's one-time permission. Pro hoc vice, I think, literally means for this case or for this matter. So it's basically I am a lawyer somewhere else, and I'd like permission as a one-time to do this case in a jurisdiction which I'm not a member of. And usually to do that, it requires a fee because, of course, the court always likes their fees. So you have to pay some money, and usually it requires finding some local attorney who will say that they're going to supervise you, which usually doesn't really happen, but they'll say they will for the purposes of it. It's usually kind of a courtesy thing. And, it's not usually that big a deal. And sometimes they'll want you to show things, but it's usually not a big deal. So, and it allows you to practice intermittently. It's not literally one time, although you have to ask for it every time. But if you start to make a number of appearances, whatever that number is a little sketchy. But if you make a number, they'll require you to be admitted on a permanent basis. But as long as you're doing it, rarely, then it's not a big deal. Okay, so you ask for permission to be, you say, I'm a lawyer somewhere. I'd like to be practice before your court as though I were a lawyer in your court. And they say, okay, after you pay us some money. And then they say, well, pro hoc vice is technically a it's a privilege, it's a courtesy, and we think that you have done some things that would violate our rules. Therefore, as a matter of our own internal discretion, we're going to revoke it. It's just, I think it's just something the judge can do unilaterally, as opposed to where if you had a bar complaint, they'd file it before a bar association, and you'd actually be brought up on the equivalent of charges and have to defend it. So this, whatever they may or may not have done somewhere else, may manifest in bar charges on its own right. But I think the sanction here is you're just thrown out of the case. And
let me two things. Number one, generally, these are professional responsibility complaints. These are ethical violations. They're saying that and the ethical violations are more or less that he had someone falsely testify, the affidavit in Georgia. Another thing is that more or less bearing false witness, it's called the bearing false witness. If you have a witness who submits an affidavit that is false, then they bang you for that. They're also banging them for candor to the tribunal. In other words, this person lied to the tribunal, and it was under, he had the person sign the affidavit and turned it in. So there's a whole bunch of specific, real serious professional responsibility issues that they're hitting them for. So they've asked both him and the counsel that did the it's ad hoc feature, right?
Pro hoc feature.
Yeah, who asked for it to both come in so they can so the court can question both of them. Now, the implications of this, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, is that this is the way it works in New York. I'm not sure how it works in other jurisdictions, but in New York. So in New York, if I go to California and practice there for this one case, and they get banged there for these type of for problems, that's this. It'll be almost identical if they banged me here for that. So if I get sanctioned there, that sanction goes over to my jurisdiction. If they tell me I can't practice here, they then now have an ethical complaint here where they'll have to go through. So I'm assuming that it's like that in most places where you have this reciprocity of discipline for attorneys. You can't go be a bad attorney someplace else and then go home and say, hey, I've been good here. So I think that's the problem that Lynn Wood would have to go through, is that if they really hit him, especially candor to the tribunal and, more or less offering false testimony, those are serious charges that when he goes back to his home jurisdiction, they are then probably going to have an issue with that. And that's why I'm saying he may be up for disbarment, and not disbarment, but even some serious sanctions. And even, what's her name? Sidney Powell, because really they were both on the same case. They were both offering this evidence. So if he's getting hit here in Delaware, just imagine what's going to happen to her when she gets hit. She's eventually going to get hit too. So that's why it's tough when you're an attorney and you are going around with these kind of wild allegations, these wild cases. If you get busted like this, it can really affect your license. And I think that's what Lynn Wood is going with now.
Yeah, so I agree with you in part, and then I'm unsure in part. This is because if Lynn Wood was a member of the Delaware bar, like being formally admitted permanently, and this were coming from the Delaware bar or whatever the equivalent is there, however they do their discipline like that, and there was a formal sanction being handed out by the Delaware bar as, you violated our rules, we're going to suspend you, whatever, then every state bar association, that would get reported to every state bar association, and suddenly now you have potential problems everywhere you're admitted. So that can cascade rapidly. So if you are admitted in a whole bunch of states and one state's bar or their Supreme Court or whatever the body is that determines that reaches a final determination that you violate their rules and you should be suspended, disciplined, disbarred, whatever, that's going to get reported everywhere. And now suddenly you have to potentially defend yourself everywhere. And the thing you would assume would happen, although it doesn't necessarily have to, is that you're going to get reciprocal treatment everywhere. So if you're like formally disbarred one place, your expectation, although not necessarily a guarantee, but your expectation is you're about to be disbarred everywhere. And so you're about to have some real problems if you didn't have already enough being disbarred in the first place.
Well, which president this happened to, right?
Yeah, Clinton.
President Clinton. He was disbarred at the federal level. And what did Arkansas do? Well, since you got disbarred at the federal level, we're taking your license in Arkansas. So
right. So here's where I'm not quite sure, because this is a pro hoc, which is, I think, unless I'm mistaken, I mean, it's just the one judge's discretion. Now there are some rules surrounding that, but it's something the judge can just give you. You're not like a member of the bar. And so it's just something the judge gives you to be like, yeah, you have basically an acting license for this one case. So I think if the judge goes through some sort of process, whatever that is internally, and takes away that permission, that's not exactly the same as being.
Well, hold on, but you still have
to bar.
But you still have to follow. all right, if a lawyer is practicing anywhere, you still have to follow the ethical rules of that particular. It's in the application. Here that also you're going to apply with the ethical rules. And if you don't follow the ethical rules, it's usually the judge that goes and says, "Hey, you violated these ethical rules. You're not candor to the tribunal," and that's what usually triggers the formal bar investigation based on what happened in the tribunal. So now, if the tribunal itself is saying, "Here are the issues," we're going to have a hearing on it, which this tribunal is saying. The next thing you know, you're going to have the second part going down now, where I think if the Delaware bar then comes up, it's something saying, "Hey, this person, here's what the tribunal said, and this is a problem," then I think it's obvious that Linwood's going to have a problem everywhere he goes. And let's not forget too, when you read this complaint, because you can read it. When you read it, you'll see we're talking about Wisconsin. They're talking about he made ethical violations in multiple jurisdictions: Wisconsin, Georgia, and now Delaware. So this is to say he doesn't have a problem. I think just because he's pro hoc vice. I don't know. I think this guy's got a real license problem. I would be worried.
Well, I tell you what, if it was me, I'd be pissing my pants in any case, because I get anything even resembling a disciplinary notice of any kind, I'm gonna freak out. Because it's like I don't want any piece of that. So I don't know how Linwood's reaction is. I'm just wondering what the full implications are. I don't want to find out, Nate. I don't want to be admitted pro hoc vice and then be thrown off the case and wonder what are the implications of that. I like to not have that problem in the first place, which is also why I'd like to practice law responsibly and not lie to the court. That would be a plus. Don't lie to the court.
Let me. Some people are saying, what are the allegations? Do you mind if I just read them out real quick? So
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
All right. So hold on. Here are some of the allegations against Mr. Linwood.
I'll put them back on screen too while you're doing that, because we kind of blew over them as I was putting them on screen. But I can just.
It's on the last page.
Yeah. So there's
it's competence, meritorious claims of contention, candor to the tribunal, truthfulness, and misconduct. Those aren't just pro hoc vice.
1-1 merit competence. That's a good one. Meritorious claim. You filed stuff that didn't have any merit. Candor to the tribunal. You lied to a court. That's always plus. Statements of false act, misconduct, dishonesty, deceit. These are the things that
those are things that get you disbarred. Those are things that get you disbarred. And you see Michigan and you see Wisconsin. These aren't things that it's just like, okay, you are pro hoc vice here. We're gonna send you somewhere else. This is like, you lose your license if we could prove this stuff. And they got a hearing for this coming up. And the person who even let him, who even vouched for him, may even have a problem.
All right. So we do have the specific allegations here, or as much as details they're going to give here. So they're saying that you did some bad things in Georgia. So in this case of Linwood versus Brad Rassenberger, which they're a plaintiff. Interesting.
Yeah, because this is Carter Page. Go to the first one. It's the Carter Page law.
Yeah, but here's my fundamental problem.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem I know in my own mind immediately. Okay. Because it's Linwood as the plaintiff. Linwood isn't acting as an attorney. They're the party. So how can Linwood violate the attorney's rules of ethics in a case to which they're the plaintiff? Because they're not acting as an attorney, because they're the plaintiff.
Were you saying this up?
Well, I'm just reading I'm reading the case header. I'm reading the caption because
on page one, it's Carter Page versus Oath Incorporated Corporation.
Well, the first one that they talk about, this Georgia litigation, is the first one that they bring up specifically.
Look at page one.
All right.
The first page. This is the initial catch. It's Carter Page versus this defendant.
Right. Okay. So so in this case, which Linwood is an attorney in this case.
Yes.
Okay. I'm on board with you there. Okay. And then it says it appears to this court that since granting this motion, he has engaged in conduct in other jurisdictions, which had it occurred in Delaware, would violate the Delaware's lawyers' rules of professional conduct. So the court is saying you have done something somewhere else that if you did it in Delaware, it would violate our rules. But then here's my problem.
All right.
Because the first one that they start with is in Georgia. In this case, Linwood is a party. They're not an attorney. So how can they violate the attorney's rules of ethics as a party?
Yes. Okay. So if you as all right, again, I'm not sure how the ethical rules go in the jurisdiction you're in, But for us, for instance,
but I can't violate Rule 1.1 as a party.
Yes,
I don't have to be competent as a party.
Well, two things. Well, I'm not sure if the Georgia litigation is for Rule 1.1. I think it's 3.1 or something like that. But I'm saying
1.1 and other things 1.1, 3.1, 3.3.
Yeah, there's different ones, like filing a false affidavit. Mr. Wood filed a false affidavit. For us, for instance, if you file a false affidavit, I'm a plaintiff in a case and I file a false affidavit with the court, that's candor to the tribunal because I am a licensed attorney. So I can't. So the rule here is either you have to tell the truth or you say nothing at all. If you lie, no matter what, where you're at in a position, if you're acting as an attorney or not, you still have an obligation as a licensed attorney to tell the truth or say nothing at all. So even though in this case, even though you're right, he is a plaintiff, he still has an obligation as a licensed attorney to only speak the truth. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying in that particular action. Do you understand what I mean?
Well, I understand what you're saying. And
you can't just lie to the court and say, oh, I wasn't an attorney. Obviously, that's because of that. You know what I mean?
Well, if I wasn't an attorney at all, if I wasn't licensed anywhere, I can't violate the rule 1.1. So the fact that I'm an attorney is immaterial because I could do exactly what I'm doing. There's nothing about being an attorney that's allowing me to do this. See, the whole thing that I always thought about is when you're acting as an attorney, you're acting in a position of trust. You're acting as an officer of the court. You're acting in a position of responsibility, and the court is expecting certain things of you as an attorney. If I'm rando party, if I don't have a law license, if I'm just John Q, and I start filing things that are false, I might be violating other laws, but I can't be violating the attorney's rules of ethics. I'm not an attorney.
Yeah, but
I'm just rando guy.
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense though. If you're rando guy, you're not an attorney, so the rules wouldn't apply to you.
Right.
But if you are an attorney, the rules do apply to you.
Even if I'm not acting as an attorney.
Yes. That's how it works here. Even if I'm not acting as an attorney and I go to a court and I'm a defendant in the case and I file a false affidavit, they're going to hit me for an ethical violation because I am an attorney. See, an attorney can't go file a false.
Well, maybe this is part of like where the attorney's rules of ethics break down under constitutional rights or something. Because if I'm a defendant in a criminal case, attorney or not, I definitely don't have a duty of candor to the court. I'm a defendant.
But if you go up there and they can prove that you made material false statements, then you can get disbarred. You can get disbarred.
If they can prove I made material false statements under oath, I have a perjury problem.
Well, Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was a defendant in the case. He was being deposed. He made false statements under oath, right? That's just like with Lynn Wood. And what did they do? After that, he went and they said, okay, we're disbarring you because of candor to the tribunal. You made false statements and you were an attorney. And then Arkansas then came back and said, yeah, because you made false statements in a deposition where you were a defendant, you're disbarred in Arkansas too. So it's not like this hasn't happened before. Bill Clinton they're doing the same thing they did to Bill Clinton. That's what's happening with Lynn Wood.
Fair enough. So Nate has properly schooled me, and I appreciate the correction. And this is one of the reasons I love these discussions, because I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't quite make sense. And then Nate's here's like, here's some precedent where this was done. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So now it's like I want to go. Now maybe I'll go look into off stream. I'll go look into the history of that and see if any of these issues were brought up in that case. That might be interesting.
But isn't that what Clinton was hit though?
I believe you. I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, he wasn't acting as an attorney at that time. I mean, that's for sure. Whatever else he wasn't, wasn't he president of the United States at the time?
He was president.
Whatever it was, he wasn't acting as an attorney, whatever else he was doing. So yeah, if they hit him with sanctions, even though he wasn't acting as an attorney, then so Nate's argument is right, and then I'm wrong, and Nate has properly given me a bad grade in this school hypothetical, and we all learn to move on with our lives. It's fine.
Yeah,
I've won one or two over you, Nate. So it's okay.
Oh yeah. Like last week. What do you mean? What last week? What the hell are you talking about?
But it's like I have enough humility to admit was like, oh yeah, I'm wrong. It's like it took a little while for you to convince me, but then you convinced me. I'm like, yeah, I'm wrong. So yeah, it's like it's wanting to be human. It's wanting to be humble. It's humble. It's like if I make a mistake, I make a mistake, right?
Yeah, but we talk to each other because we don't know it all. We try to figure it out, and
Yeah, I like to pretend I know it all, and then I have to admit that I don't know it all, and then people realize that I don't know everything.
Like don't forget, you were the 1-8. You were the 1 out of 8. Remember the whole Pennsylvania thing? We all R&R, myself, Viva Barnes, we all said the opposite, and you happen to be right.
Yeah, I won that. That's at the end. So yeah.
so yours is even better than mine because you were right against everybody. We were all wrong.
That's right. Well, it was me versus other lawyers. I won that fight, but that's fine. Yeah. So the attorney's ethics. It's been a long time since I took that class. I did pretty well on my model rules or my model ethics. Beat it by like 50 points or something ridiculous.
Oh wow!
On the model on the time I took the exam, and I got into this. I remember when I took the class ethics in law school, I got into a fight with my professor, and I'm still right about it all these years later. I finally did win. It took me like an hour to win on this exam question for like to raise my grade because it raised it like a half a letter point or something from this answer. So the issue was so I have a client. There's some amount of money I think I've earned. So let me see if I can regenerate the hypothetical in my mind. The hypothetical is I have $10,000 in a retainer. I believe I've earned $5,000. The client thinks I've actually earned $3,000. What should I do? And I said, well, what you should do is you have $2,000 that's in dispute of the difference. So you think you've earned 5, your client thinks you've earned 3. So what you should do immediately is pay yourself the $3,000 because you both agree that you earned that $3,000. So it can't sit in the client trust fund. Because once the money is earned, it can't sit in the trust fund. It has to be dispersed, whether it's for either side. So the client says you've earned 3. You're saying you've earned 3. You've also said you've earned 5, but you say you earned 3. So what you should do immediately is you should write your check yourself a check for $3,000. Then because you both agree that you haven't earned more than 5, you should write the client a check for $5,000 because that would be the amount you both agree that you haven't earned. And as to the $2,000 that you dispute about, if you want, you can go have a fight about it. So you can, sue each other or whatever it is you're going to do and have a fight about it. And that is the right answer. I know it's the right answer. And I put that on the exam and he said I was wrong. He said, I can't disperse the $3,000 to myself. I'm like, yes, I can. Not only can I, according to the ethics rules, I have to.
Yeah, because
it's earned and I have to disperse it. So not only can I have to. And it took me an hour to convince him I was right. And I remember that, like, how long has that been? 14 years, and I still remember that damn argument. I was right, damn it. I was right 14 years ago, I'm still right. Don't
mess with you, man. Don't mess with you.
All right.
At the end of the day, so we can nail this one of the thing. Linwood has a Clinton problem.
Linwood has some problems. Yeah,
he's got a Clinton problem. And it hopefully, but the thing is also too, Sidney Powell has the same problem. Sidney Powell's got the same problem because she was, don't forget, in the Georgia case, it was her and Linwood. And they're saying that the affidavits they submitted were false. Yes. So we should submit false affidavits. You got a competency problem. You got a candidate tribunal problem. And because competency is like you were incompetent by submitting false affidavits in the tribunal and not even recusing yourself, because usually if that was to happen, a lawyer would then recuse themselves from the case and say, hey, listen, this is false. But you won't throw your client under the bus. You just say, "Hey, I gotta go. I got a problem here." And usually the court.
And apparently, because we're thick as thieves over here, what was it like? Dominion Voting sent a cease and desist notice to Sidney Powell.
Yeah,
Sidney Powell then hired Linwood as her attorney. Sidney Powell's a guy or a woman, right?
Yeah, Sidney Powell's a woman. It's what's the name?
And send a notice back. So it's like, so now they're representing each other, at least for the moment. And the whole thing is like, it's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess. And she's going to be special counsel anyway. So.
No, she won't. No one's that crazy. No one's that crazy. But speaking of people not being that crazy, let's move on to Donald Trump, who has pardoned a whole bunch of people, and including today. So I thought we could go over both today and today because we got 15 from yesterday, and then we've got 26 from today. So that is 41. Did I do my math correctly in my head? Excellent. So we've pardoned a whole bunch of people. So yesterday we pardoned Alfonso Costo, a dentist, pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud. Alfred Krum, who pled guilty to moonshine, apparently distilling moonshine.
He's 89 years old.
Yeah, he pled guilty in 1952 when he's 19 to helping do some illegal moonshine. So we're giving the moonshine guy a break.
Let's get to the real ones. You need getting all these ancillary ones.
Hey, well, no, I'm serious about the moonshine. I take seriously the 21st Amendment, so let's respect. President Trump commuted Crystal Muniz's remaining term of release relating to whatever. Some Hall person, Judith, someone, Stockman, remaining sentence. Public Affairs has called for humanitarian grounds and some sort of illness. Duncan Hunter, so we're getting into the more interesting stuff. A former member of Congress who had done some misuse of campaign finances for personal expenses and stuff like that. I think he did an Italian vacation using campaign funds. That's a no-no. You're not supposed to do that. Chris Collins, at the request of members of Congress, Chris serves some time for securities fraud, insider trading. That's always good. It's not like the congressmen don't have enough leeway when it comes to insider trading. So they managed to be busted for insider trading. That's impressive. And we're going to commit you anyway. A full pardon for other people for border patrol agents with relating to stopping an illegal alien and shot the suspect who went across the border. We covered that U.S. Supreme Court case, incidentally.
Yeah, you did.
On the issue, which was a fascinating Fourth Amendment issue, because we shot them from our side of the border, but struck them on their side of the border, and is there a Fourth Amendment seizure in that case? And the ruling was no, and I thought it was a fascinating legal decision when we covered that. So those
going over across international borders. What exactly did they say with that? Because I remember the case, but I forget the outcome. Where obviously they
they said there was no seizure. They said there's no seizure because the seizure occurred in Mexico.
Yeah, it had to.
Yeah. So there's no because the case law, such as it is, says that if the U.S. is acting overseas, there's no seizure. So if the DEA kicks down a door in Mexico because they have permission from the Mexicans or otherwise participating in Mexican operations or whatever, then it's not a seizure. So they don't have to obey the Fourth Amendment. So if the DEA is kicking down a door legitimately under Mexican permission, I guess, in Mexico, that's fine. No Fourth Amendment issue. So Mexican law, maybe not Fourth Amendment.
But that just makes sense.
But then we had the cross-border issue because we had a shooting from our side of the border onto their side of the border, and the jurisdictional issue there of like, where is that happening? And that was a fascinating legal decision, and we covered that. It was, pretty interesting stuff. Papadopoulos, who was pardoned for making false statements relating to the Mueller investigation, and then Trump calls it a process crime, which I guess technically it is. It's not, but it's a distinction without a difference, at least as far as the federal law is concerned. But yeah, sure, it's a process crime. Alex Vanderswan, full pardon relating to that. Another false statement, process crime for the Mueller investigation. Maybe don't lie would be helpful. And then we had a whole bunch of people pardoned related to contractors who shot a whole bunch of people in, I believe, Iraq, if memory serves correctly.
Yeah.
Who did violate rules of engagement and were convicted of various homicide-related charges. And one of these days, maybe I'll have to really get into the depths of exactly what that is. Because what do we mean by violating rules of engagement might be interesting, but we pardoned a whole bunch of these people. So was it really murder? Well, they were convicted of that at least. So was it a good thing they were pardoned? I don't know. Maybe we have to get into the weeds on that one because it is in a theater of war after all. So the rules of engagement, are a little.
But they're civilians, though, aren't they?
Yes, they're
civilians, not military people.
They're technically civilians, yes, because they're contractors. But it's like if you're fighting for the U.S. government as a military member, or I'm not sure how much a distinction it should make, but whatever. I mean,
it's a code of military justice, not the
We pardoned Weldon Alengis. Help me out on this last name.
I don't know. It looks like Angelos.
Yeah. Weldon Angelos. He was sentenced to 55 years for selling marijuana and carrying a handgun in the course of dealing. And that it does seem like a lot. So after 13 years of prison, we let that guy go. We let go Phil Lindman, a man of integrity, subject to selected prosecution for protesting Bureau of Land Management. sentenced to 10 days in prison and $100,000. Does he get his money back? Presumably. For being hard, does he get
did he pay? Did he pay it? Did he pay it? Maybe if he paid it.
Part of a criminal sense, does he get the money back? I don't know.
I don't know. That's interesting.
I don't know if that happens or not. Well, we'll get $96,000 a check in the mail. We got Otis Gordon in the wake of a shooting at a Bible study in South Carolina, led a prayer session at the United States Capitol. What did we? Oh, he was convicted of possession with intent. So he's a pastor who's a drug dealer. Okay, well, I guess it's apparently, Philip Esformas. President Trump commuted the term of imprisonment for whatever. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to today's pardons.
Well, just so everybody understands too, the news media has been making this out to like Trump is pardoning everybody. He's this is all corrupt. Every president, when they're leaving out of office, starts throwing out pardons to friends. One name, if you guys want to Google it, Mark Rich for the Clintons. Mm-hmm. How much money did that guy give the Clintons, and how much money did he owe the government? And Bill Clinton hooked him up. Am I right? Mark Rich?
Absolutely.
So this is not like something that people don't do. You always pay back the people. George Bush did it with it was Reagan who did it with Iran-Contra, right? And then George Bush did it with some Iran-Contra. Mm-hmm. Because the only thing you do, the people who keep their mouths shut, when you get out before you go, you don't leave. Matter of fact, the one person who was left on the battlefield, the reason why, and most people, this is an interesting story. Vice President, what's his name? Dick Cheney's chief of staff. What was his name again? Scooter Libby.
That's right.
Scooter Libby had outed a CIA agent, and he was subsequently convicted. So at the end of President Bush's second term, when they were doing the mass pardons as they do for the political help, for the political guys, Dick Cheney said, "Hey, we want Scooter Libby. Let's get Scooter Libby out of there." And Bush said no. And from that point on, Cheney and Bush never talked again because Cheney said that Bush left a soldier on the field. That's how that. So what Trump is doing is not unusual. This is par for course with pardons. Go ahead.
It's pretty par for course. But of course, that was all yesterday's pardons that we covered. We still have all of today's pardons to go through to finish our completion set. So we've got 26 pardons and 3 commutations. So for today's pardons, we've got James Kossoff, convicted of filing a false tax return. Something perhaps warm to Trump's heart for no particular reason. Mary McCarty pleaded guilty to honest services fraud. So that's basically where you have a job such as a lawyer and you basically scam the hell out of your client. That's honest services fraud. So, don't do that. Christopher Wade pleaded 2 years probation for cyber crimes. Okay. Christopher II, federal pardon for a 2-decade period, battled cocaine and marijuana addiction, and has committed numerous offenses related to drug dealing, presumably. He's a community leader now. I guess good for him. Cesar Lorzada, an immigrant who was convicted of conspiracy to distribute marijuana. Joseph Stevens, felon in possession of a firearm. Okay. That's interesting because, he's predicated on a state felony conviction. It deferred adjudication, he turned it down. So whether or not he was really maybe a felon or something, or he knew about it, maybe. Andrew Warden, he convicted of wire fraud. So you're doing some sort of fraud using some sort of what's one of the favorite charges of the federal government. Lying to a federal official, wire fraud, mail fraud. What else is good? Hobbs Act, robbery, extortion. What else are some really good federal crimes that will really
lying to the FBI?
Well, that's the big one. That
gets everybody.
Yeah, the 18 USC 1001, lying to a federal official. So lying to a federal official, wire fraud, mail fraud, Hobbs Act extortion, Hobbs Act robbery. These are the things most likely to wind you up in federal jail, so probably don't do those things. The Robert Coughlin pleaded guilty to a conflict of interest as Department of Justice, doing favors in exchange for sports and concert tickets on behalf of the Department of Justice, exchanging justice for concert games. Okay. John Boltaby and Peter Atkinson convicted of a fraud scheme. Mail fraud.
The one right before that, he was reinstated recently. He was reinstated to the DC bar. Wow.
Despite the exchanging of justice for concert tickets. Apparently the DC bar is cool with that or something. That's nice to know. Apparently, if we get this bar, DC is welcome. Will welcome us with open arms. It's nice to know. Joseph Alsifini, who convicted of conspiracy to violate civil rights law under color of law. You don't see that every day. So that's what, like 18 USC 271 or 272, something like that. Conspiracy to violate civil law. So this is a law enforcement officer. Conspiracy to violate. Yeah, that's like, you don't see that every day. That's the criminal side of like 14 USC 1983.
And it's 37 months.
271, 272, or 273, something like that.
Which it was even commuted by President George H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
And now he's just got a pardon. Full pardon.
Okay. Grant a full pardon to Rebecca Charleston. What else do we do? Victim of self-trafficking, life of forced prostitution. So presumably prostitution, I guess.
But this happens a lot, though, where a lot of times people get caught up in sex trafficking. And then, it happened here in a lot. And actually, some of the cases I used to prosecute.
So she wasn't a sex trafficker or sex traffickee became a sex trafficker. Yeah, probably that's what happened.
Well, but what happens, I know here when we used to do the prosecutions here, a lot of times the women we prosecute them for prostitution, and come to find out they were being sex trafficked. So it just happened to be you'd have a woman with like 20 convictions for prostitution, but come to find out she was being sex trafficked. So they would have to vacate those sex trafficking. And that seems like the federal issues hasn't caught up with it yet. But here they just vacate them now. If we find out you were sex trafficked.
Fair enough. Ricky Cantor, full pardon related to. Oh yeah, this is the shoe insert guy. Now he was convicted of mail fraud and wire fraud. So this guy sold things that he said were cleared by Medicare, Medicaid. He put it on the label, so they're Medicare approved, Medicaid approved shoe insoles, but they decided they weren't. He was convicted of mail fraud. I think we might have covered that case. So apparently we're letting the shoe insole guy get off. Topeka Sam, kind of a cool name, I guess. Plead guilty conspiracy of possessing cocaine. James Bates Manza, who is convicted of lying to the IRS. It looks like.
Yeah, you went through the whole list. This is like halfway through. Where are the big names here?
I'm in. There's 29 of them, man. We've got to cover them all, right?
There's a crossing guard who got caught up. What's going on?
Served convicted of some financial crimes. Russell Planis convicted of conspiracy to import cocaine. Daniela Goes Wagner, single mother who's been in custody, who improperly receiving Medicare Medicaid funds, received 20 years imprisonment in order to pay $15.2 million of restitution. Okay, that's a lot. Mark Selander, member of Congress. What did he do? Obstruction of justice and failing to register on the Foreign Agent Registration Act.
So another big two.
He was working as a representative of a foreign government and failed to register. He can talk to Michael Flynn about that one too, I suppose.
Was it the spy Maria? What's her name? Maria Bettini. She got caught up with that too.
Stephanie Moore. 10 years in prison for releasing her canine on a burglary suspect in 1995, resulting in a bite wound. Well, I feel like there's a lot more to that story if she was convicted of 10 years. Police dog. Gary Bergman, 8 years in the Coast Guard, 4 years Border Patrol, convicted, accused of knocking one of the illegal immigrants to the ground, prosecuted on deprivation of rights. So again, it's like 18 USC, 271, 272, 273. John Tate, Jesse Baton, convicted of indirect campaign payments to a senator. So this is basically structuring. taking money and making it look like it's someone else's money. Charles Kushner. Now we get into the interesting stuff that Nate cares about.
Kushner's father.
This is this is the former United States attorney. Completing his sentence, he was convicted of whatever. 2 years for preparing false tax returns, witness retaliation, making false statements. Again, with a line to the federal officials. Amy, don't do that. Margaret Hunter.
Hold on. That's Jared Kushner's father, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh, that's definitely that's a hookup right
like
there.
Father, like son.
Well, that's a hookup. It's a hookup.
It's good to be in the know, man.
Yeah.
Margaret Hunter, a former federal elections commissioner, pleading guilty to conspiracy to misuse campaign funds that should be treated as a civil case. Again, with the using campaign money to go on lavish trips. Paul Manafort, there's a name that Nate will care about, right? All these other people don't really care about.
But you know what, though?
Just give me a hard time.
No. But one thing about Paul Manafort, if Trump didn't pardon him, I would have thought he had a problem. You know, like you gotta get your anybody in the Russia probe, Trump should pardon. I'm just gonna say it, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't get Trump out, then all these people have kept their mouth shut. All these people, and I know people are gonna be like, Nate, it's not a mob. It's what's the right is right. Listen, it's politics.
Politics.
You kept your mouth shut, and I only got maybe another less than a month. I got to pull a trigger, full and free pardon, and go make peace with it. But that's the way our system works. Trump is not. This is Paul. I know there's going to be a lot of people. Paul Manafort's a bad guy. He shouldn't. Listen, get over it. He should have done. This is what he was elected to do.
This is pretty par for the course. I think Nate's right on that. It's like if you're disgusted by we can point to other things that were disgusted by. I did like Legal Eagle's tweet about how he was absolutely disgusted by these pardons. I want to ask Devin over here if he was disgusted by some of the other pardons in the past, or if he thought those were all good too. I'm just curious for my own edification.
Nah, he did.
Roger Stone sentenced this prosecutorial misconduct. Yeah, such the pre-Dodd raid of home. That was a little bullshit. I do have to admit, when they raided his home for that was a little bullshit. It was a little unnecessary. Faced political bias, pardoning it. Mark Shapiro and Ivring Stitsky, real estate firm, prior felony conviction, and used a straw CEO. So that's not good stuff. And that's the end of all those pardons. So we finally made it through the long, long list of all the pardons, and maybe more pardons to come. Although I've not actually committed any federal crimes I'm aware of, I just like to put my name out there for the hell of it. So if you want to give me a full and complete pardon for whatever, that'd be fine. Just want to,
anything before X date, right? Anything before the date of the pardon, you can get pardoned for.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
No future crimes at all, past crimes. But I'm expecting a son, daughter. I'm expecting the whole, any pardon against you before X date. I think Trump. The only problem that Trump has is that who's going to pardon him, because he may have some issues.
Yeah, I'm not sure he does, because under the Nixon case, it makes pretty clear that the president enjoys absolute immunity for his official acts. So you'd have to argue for his federal liability. Now, state liability is a whole other set of problems, but for his federal liability, you'd have to argue that some of the stuff he's done is outside the scope of his official duties, and he's the head of the entire damn executive branch. So that's a lot of turf.
Well, hold on. Well, just to be clear, President Trump, as long as he's president, has sovereign immunity. He can't be charged.
I'm talking about, sovereign immunity is another problem, but absolute immunity. He'll enjoy absolute immunity going forward.
Yeah, going forward, you said?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about going after he's out of office. He's just like me and you. During the 4 years he's in office, he can't be charged anyway. He can't be charged anywhere on earth. Even if he goes to another country, they can't charge him with a crime because he has sovereign immunity.
Right.
But I'm assuming that what he would want to get is that immunity, because don't forget, he has issues before he became president. He doesn't enjoy that immunity before he became president.
That's true. He wouldn't enjoy any federal exposure he had before he became president. That's true. Yeah. His greatest federal exposure before he became president is presumably tax issues.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's any there to be found, and he's been under audit forever, and maybe there's some tax issues there to be found, or maybe not. For example, I did note there was one story that said that they thought Trump had undervalued his assets on its tax returns and overvalued his assets for the purposes of getting the loans against those assets.
That's a New York case.
Yeah, quoted two different sets of numbers, but it's not clear, at least initially that those aren't right, because you might quote different values for different purposes, and it might be fully legitimate to claim different values for different purposes. In one situation, you might claim only the space that can be habitable, only the space that people could use. So if you're looking to like what people could rent out, you wouldn't necessarily include like the utility closets, or maybe you would include all the physical infrastructure. So the value of the building, you might have the value of the building as a building, the value of a building for its ability to generate revenue. So there might be different ways of calculating value, and you might do it for different purposes legitimately. So just because two numbers are different doesn't necessarily to me indicate that one or the other is wrong or illegal. They might be, but there might be legal reasons to do them differently. I don't know. I'm not a tax law, nor do I want to be.
I know in New York, the issue he's coming up with in New York is the two different numbers, because that's why they were to get the tax returns. They were tax returns versus the bank statements. And so everybody understands what was happening. The New York grand jury were subpoenaing both Deutsche Bank and all these other things. And that's why it went up to the Supreme Court. So what they're doing, they're actually questioning the Deutsche Bank employees about what Trump did on the application for the loan, because it's bank fraud. That's essentially what they're saying. He's committed bank fraud if he, and that's what you do. You make your assets look bigger so you can get better rates on the loan, and you make them look less for taxes. So if you have too big of a difference between those two, the taxes and what you told to the bank, then you have bank fraud. So
yeah, it's possible. It's possible there's bank fraud, but I'm
talking about this in the simplest form.
Yeah. So yeah, that's exactly right. So like basically the fraud in either case is that I reported the wrong number, in order to gain an advantage for that. Yes. So if I make my properties look artificially worth more in order to get a bigger loan against it, that's fraud, right? So I have purposely misrepresented the number in order to induce you to get me a loan against that. That's pretty much textbut fraud
at a lower rate. But the thing is, the way you usually get caught is because you usually flip it to pay taxes.
Yes. So. Yes. Yeah. And exactly right. And that would be the fraud the other way. It's like, because I want my assets to be lower on my tax return because I don't want to pay liability. So I'm going to undervalue them. And that's basically fraud the other way around too, against the US government. And it's tax fraud in that case versus bank fraud. My only point was it's possible, because I'm not a tax expert. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not a financial law expert on any domain. This is way outside of my wheelhouse. But I'm just trying to think of why could these numbers be different? Why they might be legitimately different? And it might be possible that there's reasons that the numbers would be different, but not illegal.
Yeah, and I definitely want to say this clearly. Yeah. I'm not saying that Trump did anything illegal when it comes to this. I'm just saying that the theory of the case is that in one way, you say it's more for this reason, you say it's less for this reason, but at no means have they even shown any evidence that he did anything like that. It's just it is what it is. So
so we're a long way from being able to determine anything. Trump's liability, Trump's federal liability would be primarily tax related, one would imagine, before becoming into office, for that matter, even during office, because that would be personal capacity. So if he's still committing fraud on his tax returns, that's not official capacity stuff. So his biggest liability from the federal government would seem to be for tax reasons. That would seem to be his biggest liability, period, though, is from state issues, from the Trump Foundation or the Trump or any of his Trump businesses in Manhattan. So the New York County state might want to have a little bit of fun with him for things he might have done there. So that, I think, is his biggest exposure, is from the Trump-related businesses that were operating in Manhattan. Now, again, I don't know what exposure he might really have, but that seems way more likely in terms of exposure than federal exposure. I think his federal exposure is minimal.
Yeah, I think federally he's probably not going to have a problem.
Yeah,
but do you know one thing that's really interesting? Do you know a president can still be impeached after he leaves office?
Yes, technically that's true. Yes,
it's a crazy. For those of you who don't know, the president can be, because after the president leaves office and the private citizen, they still get all the benefits of being a past president, the security, this, and they get a salary. But so if they do something bad, Congress can actually impeach them after they leave office and take all that stuff away, which is kind of wild. So
that's true.
They were thinking about doing it to Bill Clinton. Actually,
you are correct, sir. Yes, you can, in fact, impeach someone even after they leave office. So maybe we will have Trump impeachment hearings come February. For some reason, yes, we could theoretically do that. This rodeo may not be over. I had forgotten that fact, but thank you for reminding me, so I just mentally go through the horror of that being an actual possibility. That's great. Thanks, Nate. That's helpful.
Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about that.
Well, no, it's not something I think about. It's not something most people think about. It's not something I think about. But you're like, yes, you are correct. Yes, you can impeach someone even after they leave office. Yes, you are correct, sir. Well,
somebody gets convicted of a crime in New York. Let's say if he gets convicted of bank fraud in New York. You telling me impeachment's not going to be a word that comes up from the Democrats? Well,
I don't know that the convictions anywhere in the near future. I have a hard time believing it is, because I have to think that whatever it is so complicated in terms of its financial. I mean, Southern District. Well, this isn't Southern District, it's state, but still, it's so complicated that I have a hard time believing there's a trial anywhere in the near future. I have a hard time believing there's really an indictment anywhere in the near future. To be
for
quite
Trump?
Yeah.
You know how easy it is to get an indictment for bank fraud?
Okay,
it's crazy.
Okay, you make a fair point. It is Trump, though.
Here's the paper. Yeah, but the thing is that the grand jury.
What do you think is going to happen? They're going to have some messenger up on the dais be like, "Oh, by the way, I want to hand you this indictment. You've just been served. Congratulations. Your way to your first one."
Let's just be honest. You got to seek a grand jury in one of the most liberal cities in the country on a paper case. Here are the numbers for this. Here are the numbers for this. We need an indictment. I'm
sure that Trump's name on the indictment will in no way induce their vote to present that.
Yeah.
Nate does make a good point. I don't think the district attorney in Manhattan is looking to embarrass themselves, though. So even though they could do that, I'm not sure they necessarily want to. I think the threat of it's more interesting anyway. Having it luring over his head just to get like grand juries and make him sweat might be more entertaining. But I guess we'll find out. So if come 12:01 on the 20th, if someone walks up to Trump and be like, "Yo, by the way, here's your indictment. Please appear in the courthouse."
It won't be it'll be an arrest. That's what
you're not going to arrest them on the. They're not going to arrest them.
Put your hands behind your back while he's up there on the stage.
I don't see that going over particularly well with the Secret Service. I don't want to find out. Yeah, let's not try. All right, so I have some more stuff. If you want to keep going, Nate, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so here's a story that I'd be interested to see what your input is on it, and if you have any thoughts on it. I saw this article about this issue of racism and white supremacy and far-right militancy in law enforcement. And so as a former law enforcement officer, former prosecutor, a guy who would have way more knowledge on this, I was wondering the degree to which you think there is, there's this idea, and I don't know how true it is, that, we want to indict the members of the Klan, but we can't because there's the same members as the police officers. It's just a different uniform, that old cliche. So I don't know that we go that far on it, but I was curious your thoughts on, is there a racism? Well, let's go with the more extreme argument first. Is there a white supremacy alt-right problem in law enforcement? Is this a thing?
I'll tell you this. I've worked with a lot of different cops from a lot of different agencies. I've gone to a lot. I never saw an entrenched problem that happened. You know what I mean? I just hadn't seen it. But what I did see is some people have bad ideas of what to expect from different neighborhoods. Like, for instance, we used to have a lot of cops come from the suburbs, and they had a different life experience than coming into the hood. So you're coming from the suburbs where, there's pretty low crime, good schools, that type of thing. And then they send you to a place where crime is high. There's shootings, there's drugs, there's all this stuff. So there's a fear factor because, number one, the people there don't look like you. There's a fear element. So it's not, and have I seen some cops say and do racist things? Yes. But was it ever a point where it was just like so many and this was something? No, I think and I can only speak for myself. Most, if not 99.9% of the officers, even the ones who may have done something insensitive in the past, I've seen all those people be the first one to run toward gunshots, to save black people. Matter of fact, there was one guy who I swore was a racist. I was like, this guy's just fucking racist as hell. But when shit hit the fan and people needed to be saved, his racist ass was over there trying to save black people and Hispanic people just like anybody else. Now, is it because it was his job? Maybe it's because we're all doing it. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't think it's a problem as people want to make it out to be, because especially too, like here in New York, like 40% of the police department is minority anyway. You know what I'm saying? So, and the head of the chief of the police, the chief of the department was black. So it's an interesting thing. Maybe if you go down south, maybe it might be more prevalent there. But from my perspective, do racist things happen? Yes. But is it an issue in which cops are just out there, trying to arrest black people for being black? I just hadn't seen that, and I hadn't experienced that.
I wouldn't know, and that's why I asked the question. But I think that the population is probably roughly equal to the population at large, and it seems to me that white supremacy is a very minority opinion. Just generally, there's not a lot of real white supremacists out there, and I think you'll find more people saying that that they're Antifa, or saying that they're BLM, or saying that they're other groups on the left, than you'll find people say that they're members of alt-right groups or far-right groups. There's people in their Twitter bios who will put they're members of some of these more left-leaning groups that raise concerns to my mind. So I don't know. And when you look at the violence that's occurred, the number of Charlottesvilles has been well eclipsed by the number of far left destruction that seems to have occurred, and so that's more concerning to me. But yeah, I don't know how problematic this is, and I don't know, maybe we are just like witch hunting.
Well, I do want to say this, and I think, and that's where you get these nuanced conversations, because that's where you can't really have these nuanced conversations without being called a racist, without being called this, and I think that's the issue, because there is a problem, but the problem isn't as bad as some people make it seem, and the problem isn't and it's not as great as other people make it seem. Is there an issue with over policing of certain areas? Yes, and I always tell the story about what I saw and what I experienced. For us, it's really the statistical driven enforcement model, which makes sense. But if you're in a good neighborhood, and let's just take race out of it, if you're in a good neighborhood where there's nobody doing any crimes, everybody's nice, and you see a kid smoking a joint, right, or smoking weed, it's going to be less likely you're going to give that kid a ticket. Why? Because the neighborhood is nice, and if you give that kid a ticket, the next month they're going to be like, well, you gave one ticket, now your quota is now one ticket, right? Because you're finding people, and so now you got to look for somebody else to get a ticket. So it's less likely for you to want to stir the pot. Let's keep the neighborhood good. Let's keep everything down. Let's keep me working less. Presence alone. But if you're in a bad neighborhood, then the statistical driven analysis says, for instance, you got to give 3 tickets, right? You got to give 3 summonses. So now, let's say at the end of the month, you only find 2 people. You're now going to be trying to give that 3rd summons, because if you don't give the 3rd summons, you get a bad performance evaluation. They're going to be like, why didn't you give 3 summonses, so forth and so forth. So it really takes that discretionary piece of law enforcement out. So that's where I think you get the over policing in minority neighborhoods, because you just have more crime there. Because let's understand, poverty leads to more crime. Where and that, I think, is the issue, where maybe you have to start thinking about how to police these areas differently, so you don't have that aspect of it, where now you have cops giving tickets not because they want to, but because you have some bureaucrat saying you have to give me 3 tickets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Now, I'm not an expert in the field again, so just hearing what you're saying and responding to it, based on my natural background, my initial reaction is, well, first of all, quotas as such are kind of dumb, because just because there was X crimes committed before, it doesn't necessarily mean that will continue to follow, or you'd expect to follow. So quotas are a little bit dumb, but the idea of allocating police resources in general to where crime seems more logical. So you could take a note of where crimes are happening or being reported, and you could look to objective data like robberies and burglaries and murders and things that are, things that are more objective in terms of that. And you can even go to like broken windows, broken cars, vandalized things. There's some of these things that are quantifiable, metricizable. And it would make sense, at least on first impression, to say, well, I should allocate more police resources to places where there's more crime. That seems positive. Now there might be reasons not to do that, or reasons other approaches would make more sense, but that would be my gut reaction. Well, what you said about poverty and crime, the other thing that came to mind is it's kind of a vicious circle, because people are poor, they're more likely to go to crime, and because there's crime, I think also people are more likely to be poor, because if you have a bad neighborhood, people are less likely to come in and make investments in the neighborhood. They're less likely to build new businesses, build new things. They're less likely to inject economy into the place, because that economy is not secure because of the crime. So there's a vicious circle problem. So I wouldn't know the degree to which trying to excise the crime would in and of itself end the poverty, because maybe more people move in. And then they say that's gentrification, which is also bad for some reason. So I don't know how to deal with all those issues. It's interesting, because if white people move in, it's gentrification. If they move out, it's white flight. It's like you can't. It's like, So, but in any case, it's like, yeah, there might be some reason to try to deal with this, and at least what Giuliani did when he was mayor. I mean, he cracked down a lot of stuff. He did some broken window stuff, went after the window washers and the jaywalkers, and that actually went and did some wonderful work as mayor. And then, of course, as U.S. attorney, ended the entire damn mob himself, one man machine. So, I think there's a lot of things there.
Well, one thing I think Giuliani did, he was an asshole to everybody. So he went to the Jewish neighborhoods. He was an asshole to them. He came to the black neighborhoods. He was an asshole to everybody. He was like, you know what? I'm just going to enforce all the laws equally. So his thing, and to all his faults now, one thing that I think Giuliani did was say, okay, we're just going to enforce the laws, right? If you jump a turnstile, we're just going to literally enforce the laws. And I think that's as good a policy as you're going to get. But I think the problem is that a lot of these things start to become bastardized, because unfortunately, when you're talking about crime and poverty, there's always the underlying problems with crime. And I think one of the main focuses of trying to have a police department that's more responsive to the needs of the people is that you have to do it in a way where you still give the officers discretion to not give a ticket, because there's been so many times I could arrest somebody that just didn't, right? Because I had the discretion of whether or not to do so. And when you have these kind of blank quotas, they don't call them quotas, they call them goals. When you have these blank quotas, right, that takes away that discretion. So, for instance, I'll tell you a story about one of my supervisors. Before, actually, this was when we were in the academy. One of the supervisors, he was an old cop. He was a cop from NYPD, and he told us how the quota system messed him up, because when they first brought it on, he had to give, I think they call them parkers, but he was actually doing car stops. So like, you sit in a place and see if a car, speeding, and you give him a ticket. So so it was the end of the month. He needed like one more, right? He needs one more. So he sees a guy speeding down, blowing red lights, going all the way down. And the guy sees him, right, with the lights, but the guy is blowing him all the way down, going down. So he eventually pulls the guy over like a block from the hospital. The guy is actually saying he's having a diabetic crisis, and he's just trying to make it to the hospital, right? Just trying to make it to the fucking hospital. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I gotta make it. I gotta make it to the hospital. Please, you could just follow me to the hospital, right? You know what the guy had to do? He wrote him the fucking ticket right there. Anyway, why? Because if he didn't write the ticket, he was afraid they were going to change his shift. So he wrote the guy the ticket, and then the ticket was thrown out. But he wrote the guy the ticket, and that's what I'm talking about. That officer at that moment didn't have the discretion to say, this is ridiculous, go on with your way. Why? Because there was negative consequences for him. And so I think there's a better system out there. And I also think, too, when people talk about institutional racism, they're talking about if you look at what they call the Stanford studies, the study done with Stanford, they found that police officers were more aggressive when it came to African Americans and Latinos in terms of, making in a situation where something would happen, they would be more likely to make an arrest or do a search if you happen to be a minority and if you're a white person. So those are some things that maybe we have to maybe do more training or understand those independent biases or something like that. Because I think that maybe that is also a problem when you're talking about the officer discretion. But I also think if you take away discretion from officers, that also can lead to these problems like you had with the marijuana thing for weed in New York.
Sure.
So
sure. Absolutely. Question for you from the stream, asking you to elaborate a little bit more on the quotas and performance, what it means and how it works. So I think you've been talking about this a little bit, but they wanted a little bit more detail.
Well, that's funny. I was a stat guy at my job, but the way it worked was, so there's an area that you would police, and you'd have there would be people go out there and say, okay, we see X amount of cars parked illegally. We have X amount of people calling for different crimes. So they would say, okay, for each officer who's working, if you're working in the daytime, you may have more. If you're working at night, you may have less. So you may have 3 arrests. You have to get 3 arrests in a particular time period, and you have to write maybe 10 parking tickets within that time period, right? Because that's just the statistics that they'll go in and see what's going on in that neighborhood. So the officers to keep, and that was a way of the department to judge officers' performance. If you got your arrest, if you got this, you were performing well. It was an indicator of how well officers did. Now, what happens is that I think in NYPD they did something different where, let's say there was a crime wave that happened in the neighborhood. Then you'd have the person from that precinct have to go downtown to what they call comp stats, and they'll look through their number. They'll be like, well, hey, then your officers aren't making the right number of arrests, or your officers aren't giving the right number of tickets. So, this is the reason why crime is up. So they would go yell at the boss and tell them like, hey, we're going to transfer you, blah, blah, blah. Then that boss would go back and then yell at his people. We need to get these arrests up. We need to get these. And stop and frisk, for instance, were one of those numbers, right? The more, let's say, for instance, if we had a robbery pattern in a particular area, then they would send the uniforms out to do more stop and frisk, right? How many stop and frisk do you have? And if you had, if you get, so then when you go down to comp stat, they'll say, well, how many stop and frisk did you do? We did 100 and this. So that's what they did. And again, it was a way of downtown to judge the performance of officers in different areas. Now, where I worked, it was different in the sense of we didn't have the quota system like they had, but my colleagues at the NYPD did have that quota system, and they called it a goal system. But it was really to determine how officers' performance in the field would translate to things like, to performance evaluations, promotions, and things of that nature.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Thank you for going into that more detail. And there's also one thing that I want to respond to, just as a little tip to conversational point for me. Jason Davis said, Kurt must recognize his own white privilege before he can open his mind to see things differently. So I just wanted to respond to this because one of the problems, I try to keep a very open mind and I try to listen to others about a whole range of issues. But just in terms of communication, at least to me, the term white privilege is so amorphous and so ill-defined that I don't know what we're talking about. It's one of those terms that seems to mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So when people say, these are white privileges, like, I don't even know exactly what you're talking about, because it could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I'd like to know the answer to the question, what I'm actually talking about. Words only have value in so much as they communicate ideas so that we can have a common language. And so you say a term to me like white privilege, it's like, I don't quite understand exactly what that is. It's so amorphous, and it can be everything. And it's like, I wouldn't know where to start. Now, if you want to, where Nate and I are trying to have a discussion on some more substantive things about, we're talking about police policies, we're talking about quotas, we're talking about, some people brought up about white collar crime. I put that on screen, said white collar crime is not being prosecuted enough, being under prosecuted. I thought that was a fair point, brought that up, and we could look into more of that. I mean, what is worse, the stick-up man who mugs you on the street corner, or the banker who does it with a smile and takes a thousand old lady's money? What's worse? But one's more viscerally understandable, I suppose. Anyway, but yeah, we're trying to actually have a substantive discussion about various things and various policies we could be considering. And Nate gives this wonderful answer about how it impacted him and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, I understand all these things, and I could, if I were so inclined, have a discussion about them and talk about various points of his. Is to be like, well, you said this and I don't agree with this, or here's some point where I think this is right, this is wrong, or whatever. Now, I thought his explanation was perfectly fine. There was no particular need for me to respond to it, but I understood it so that I was able to have a cogent conversation. So just as a pro tip, you probably should avoid using terms like white privilege, because there's a lot of people, including myself, who, despite a fair amount of education, don't quite know what we're talking about. It sounds like we're being asked a little bit to wear a scarlet letter, the white, the scarlet A,
for being white,
maybe scarlet W for white atonement or something. It's like we don't quite know what we're being asked to do. We're just being asked to confess unspecified sins. It's like a little bit like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't know what it is. So, pro tip.
I will say this though. When I hear the term white privilege, I do think it's ill-defined. But I do think there is an honesty. If we're just being honest about the conversation, there is a difference in the way police interact with Caucasian people versus Black people. And the only reason why I'm convinced of this is because I've seen it happen before, right? I've actually been involved in situations where I've done it before. So I'm gonna be honest with you guys. There's been situations where there's a white person and a Black person, and I've wound up treating the white person differently than I treated the Black person. And there's a lot of different factors that go into it. Number one, it was the neighborhood I was in. I was in the middle of Harlem. So that, policing in that area, most people who I'm arresting happen to be minorities, right? It's not going to happen to be a lot of white people. But then when I go to a scene and something is happening and it happens to be a white person there, I'm less inclined to think that white person was going to be the perpetrator, because it's just, that neighborhood, it kind of, leads me to believe that, I'm going to see the same thing. And it has happened before. There was one time I did go to a scene and it was a Black guy and a white guy. We were in a Black neighborhood, and, like 90% of the people we arrest happened to be Black or Latino, and the white guy happened to be the bad guy. And I'm thinking the white guy was the victim, but I think the conversation, and it's sad to say, because I had to kind of check myself, and I'm a Black guy, I had to check myself. And don't get me wrong, my partner, who is pro-Black, who wore the African thing on his uniform to show he's pro-Black, he made the same mistake too, right? And I'm like, he's not a racist either. But so I think the conversation, when you talk about white privilege, it's sometimes, if for instance, if I was downtown in a white neighborhood, it would be opposite. But I think also, if you did have a Black person and a white person, I would be more inclined to think the Black person was doing something wrong, even in that situation. So I think that conversation about how we see both the differences in the race happens not to be. I don't think it's. I think it's because of the history of this country. It was the criminalization, obviously, of the black man from back in the Jim Crow era, right? Because of you know about the black codes and everything, right? It was criminalization, right? Because what happens is,
we go old school, talk Green Book.
Yeah, exactly. For people who just don't know, when slavery was outlawed, the exception was the 13th Amendment, so the criminalization of the black man. So the moral thing that the South would do is say, black people are bad, they're savages, they're criminals. And if you made them criminals, most of the penitentiaries, for instance, the largest penitentiary in Louisiana happened to be on a plantation, right? Because they sent people back to the plantations and had them work on the plantations. So you have 100 years of this criminalization of the black male to recriminalize them in the South. And that even happened here in New York, in the North. And I think we're still suffering with that. When you see a black person, you still have that mentality. And I don't think the news media and the liberal news media doesn't help, because a lot of times when you watch the evening news, there was one time, I think there was a study done where there was one town where there was more white people committing these petty crimes than black people, but the people who you saw on the news all the time happened to be black. So that's something that I think we all have to kind of understand and change the narrative, so we can understand that, hey, it's not the case that only, more white people commit crimes than black people. So that's something I think we have to kind of realize. I don't know if I explained that well, but that's
I think it makes total sense. And it sounds to me like, all humans are looking for algorithmic shortcuts, basically trying to look for ways to make decisions faster. And it's just kind of built in. And so pattern recognizing machines. So it makes total sense. why, if you saw something as a pattern, then you would identify with that pattern and think that this is going to fall into the pattern. I think people do that all the time. It's also gambler's fallacy. Just because it was true the last couple times, it means it will be true this time. People expect things that are true to remain true and remain consistent. So there is a natural bias there. It's not really racism as such. It's just these pattern seeking mechanisms where people expect what is true now to continue to be true into the future. So I think more of that than racism as such, but that could be me.
But before I go, I'll tell you one crazy story. I used to work at I'm gonna hate saying this, Banana Republic. I was in Banana Republic. I love that job.
Banana Republic kind of guy.
I love Banana Republic, man. It was Banana Republic is owned by Gap Incorporated, right? So I was working at Banana Republic. Great job. And we were doing loss prevention to security people. And it was fascinating because we were getting hit major for like major stuff. Like we had $1,000 coats we were getting hit for. And we were like, but we always noticed that there were these black kids that come in, and the only thing they would do is go run around the store looking at stuff. So we kept saying, like, what the hell's going on? Why, So, as soon as they come in, everybody's watch the kids, keep asking, bother them. So we're always, so as soon as they come in, everybody's on high alert watching these kids. So we've been lost. So what they do is every year they do a count, inventory count, and find that you lost like $20,000 worth of stuff. So this is when the NYPD comes in and they're like, well, can we see your tapes? If you're losing this much stuff, something's got to be. So they looked at the tapes. So we kept saying, hey, we always had these kids come in. So they went and looked at the tapes, come back, and they say, well, the kids aren't stealing anything. It's actually this guy. And the kids would come in and do their little thing, run around or whatever. And maybe 5 minutes later, 2 white guys come in suits and ties, dressed very clearly, and with briefcases and bags. And the bags were lined with the lining. So when they put it with the clothes in, they could just walk out the door and went and set off the alarm.
That's cool. That's clever.
And they would, and when the kids would do something that they would scream at something, they would take a whole thing of clothes and just dump it into the bag, and then walk out the store. And we saw them on tape, and they were doing this time and time and time again. And that's showing you how, and we were a black, and all my security guys were black. They were playing off of our own racism. We were racist against our black people. And they had played that to steal thousands and thousands of dollars worth of stuff. So when somebody says kind of like white privilege versus black, even us black people did the same thing to other black people. So that's what I'm saying. I think if you're just saying white people bad because they feel this way or think this way, I think that's a conversation non-starter, because black people even think this way too.
But then again, and maybe this is a point without a difference, or maybe it's not worth mentioning. But to me, it just goes back to this idea that we're pattern recognition machines, because when you tell me that story, what I hear is you're seeing something that's disrupting the pattern, and you're trying to figure out why is it disrupting the pattern. These people are coming in and they're yelling and screaming and running around, and that's getting your attention because it's unusual. The unusual thing gets your attention, and I think most people can relate to this. I'm sure many people are probably aren't driving to work these days, but I'm sure most people have driven to work and like forgotten how they got there. I mean, I've had that happen when I used to commute every day, where I've gone to work and it's like, I literally can't remember driving. I know it happened because I got here, but I literally can't remember it. And the reason I can't remember is because my brain completely filtered it out, because it's completely normal. So it's what I expected. So every once in a while I get to work and I'm like, I can't remember driving here. And I just know because it's my brain filtered out the information. So when you tell me that story, what I hear is, okay, so there's a bunch of people doing a disruptive thing. The disruptive thing is designed to get your attention. It did design to get your attention, and you filtered out the ordinary thing. It's the classic with the kids in the shirts passing the basketball to each other, and then the guy in the gorilla his chest in the middle of the screen, and no one sees him because they're told to count the ball. So they're focused on the one thing. And so they're told to keep track of that. And they don't notice this guy in his full suit come pound their chest, because it's not what they're paying attention to. So to me, it's just like pattern recognition and pattern bias rather than racism. And I think, I don't know. That's just what comes to mind to me.
You know what? I read this dissertation on something called the balanced sensory effect.
Yeah.
And what it is that all of your senses are kind of in a balance. So if I flash a bright light at you, but also play like a song, you won't hear the song because your body just be focusing on the flash of the light. So the
Sure.
oversaturation of one sense over, and that's what happens even with this. Our senses were so saturated with looking at these people. They seem out of place. They're making noise. So our senses, so we don't see anything else. Even with the ball thing, your senses are so focused in on one thing that you just don't see the other thing. And it's a fascinating phenomenon. But the thing is, if we were all white, people would have said we were racist, but we happen to be black.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. It's we're quick to say something is racist, and by doing that, we never actually get to the underlying problem of why it actually happened. Why are black people thinking this way? You know what I'm saying? Why, like for the NYPD, they were saying that like 90% of the people who are being arrested were black and Latino for weed, but they were being arrested by other black people. They were being arrested by black officers because 50% of the officers out there were black, right? So instead of seeing that, hey, there's a problem, there's another problem here that may have race may be involved in it, but can we look beyond that and see if there's something else that's also driving this factor, just like in the Banana Republic thing. So that's what I'm saying. I think sometimes race blinds us to the true issues, and we'll never get there because we'll only see race and never ask the next question, which is probably more likely the problem.
Yeah, but I also think it's a distraction because, like, if people think it's racism, it's like it's important to ask the right question and give the right answers. And I'm not saying that necessarily my answers are the correct ones. It's just like this is what pops into my mind. It's like maybe it's not racism as such. Maybe it's this other factor which seems to have some scientific and academic prudence to it, and that maybe there's other explanations because it's probably not that you and your fellow officers and fellow people are biased against black people as such. That would be a little odd. It's probably due to other factors, and like, what would that be? And like, well, here's a possible explanation that would make logical sense about why people would reach these kind of conclusions. You're more likely to look at the guy in the you're more likely to look at the guy who doesn't fit in, the guy who doesn't belong. In whatever situation that is, and whatever dynamic that is. So this is the cliche of the person driving the beat down car in the nice neighborhood or whatever. It's like, is it because we're biased, or is it because it's just the extraordinary thing? It's the unusual thing that we get our attention to. And it's like, that seems odd because it is odd from your point of view. Now, there might not be anything wrong with it, but why did it catch your attention? Is it because of racism, or because it breaks the pattern? And so that's why it gets your attention. So it's like, yeah, is it really racism, or is it pattern recognition? And it's trying to figure out what's really going on. And if it is really pattern recognition, then maybe we can ask more intelligent questions. But if we just go to, well, they're racist, that's a bit more problematic.
Yeah,
so
agree.
But that's the conversation I'm trying to have while the chat is eating itself alive on the who is racist and who is not.
Oh my God! Well, now, unfortunately, I do have to go now because now I got the kids I got to scream at because I still hear them yelling. Can you hear anybody in the background? This mic is really awesome.
Yeah, we must bow to to the superior microphone that is the SM7B, the Joe Rogan mic, the one and only, the classic, $400, which you got for $250 on eBay. Nate, you're gonna have to I'm accepting Christmas gifts, just to let you know. It does sound really good. It sounds really, really good. So yeah, maybe getting that. But now I have a green screen. So yay.
Oh, the green screen is going to be fantastic. The green screen is going to be fantastic. Well, but I've been using
it this whole time.
You've been using it?
Yes. That's not really my apartment. Yes.
Oh wow.
That's a picture of my apartment. See?
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That. Well, why would you use a green screen just to do the picture of your apartment?
Well,
that's amazing.
I'm testing it. I commissioned a background, but I wanted to test it. So I was like, okay, so let's test it out and see if anyone notices. So yeah, it's like, okay, I'll just take a picture. Said, yeah, that's not really my apartment behind me. It's a picture of my apartment behind me.
I didn't notice that at all. That's fantastic. That's a good screen. That's a good green screen. That's a good green screen. Do you have a lit? Did you light it?
Mount Dog light that you have that's pointed right out.
Oh, so you don't have anything separate for the green screen?
No, it's just pointed right at me.
Oh wow, that's crazy. All right, nice.
Full reveal. You ready for this?
All right, yeah.
Nice. Ready? How you like that?
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
I know.
That's crazy.
So just try to play with that and see how it really works in the real life. I know. Yeah. So I commissioned a background on Fiverr for the erudite set. So we'll see if the erudite set works out. But we're giving it a try. So we'll see. But anyways, I want to say goodbye to my guest. It's been a pleasure as always, Nate. It's always been a pleasure. Until next week on Wednesday, we're on your channel.
Yes.
And at some point, we're going to be on Emily's channel next week, so that should be fun.
That'll be fun. Yeah. Because I got to hear what she said about this case. This case is it's just blowing my mind so much. Because I told Emily, I think 70% that Katie can easily win because she's a commentary channel. It's just so hard for a commentary channel to get hit with defamation. I just don't, but she thinks it's possible. But I don't know.
That was the nice little touch there for the racism thing. It's like, yeah, only a ginger can call another ginger. You know that song?
Oh, did you see that? Did you see that the video on my channel about the Russian spy?
I did, yes.
Oh, what did you think about that?
Man, it's all amazing, man. It's like you can't make this stuff up. Reality is better than fiction. Yeah, check out Nate's channel. He produces great content. I don't know if you saw the super chat from earlier, but someone was saying you got to produce more videos, man. They love you, Nate. They love you. Someone actually commented on one of my videos saying how you were their favorite lawyer. They said it on my channel, Nate.
Oh, well, you know what? No. Well, you know what? I'm trying to produce. Because I have so much content that I have to get out now. But obviously, it's Christmas. This past couple of days, I haven't been on doing anything because the videos that you guys saw was just videos I had in the can. But I have to get I have to start getting more stuff out because I want to get as many videos as you do out. You do so many videos. But the funny part about it is, you know what messes me up? I start watching like your stream or something like that. You'll play a game and next thing I know, I'm watching your shit for like 2 hours and like I should have wrote my script and then I'll watch Viva for like another half an hour. So I just gotta cut everybody off and just do my own thing. Not because it's just so fascinating stuff. Like and a lot of people before we go, a lot of people don't understand this. It's just think about this. When I talk to Viva and Kirk just about just legal stuff, and even with Nick or whoever. And they're lawyers. It's interesting because it's when you're a law nerd, it's hard to get into the weeds. Like for instance, when I talk about Morrison or we talk about one of these obscure cases or something like that. Yeah. Kirk knows what I'm talking about. He can give me great feedback and he can tell me, hey, I think you're wrong about this. I'm wrong about this. And his opinion is and I feel like he's giving me an opinion that's not colored by like for instance with the Pennsylvania case we were talking about. He was on the exact opposite side of his political leanings, and I was on the exact opposite side of my political leanings, and we both had great arguments. And Kirk happened to be right, and that's what I'm talking about. It's understanding that the person is not trying to convince you of something because they want to convince you of a political position, but they're just saying, here's the analysis that I believe is legally correct, and that's what I love about our conversation. It's about the law.
Like tonight when we had that conversation about the ethics thing, and I wasn't convinced, and you said something like, "Oh yeah, you're right," and you convinced me. So I love these conversations too because like we can have a cogent conversation, and then like if it's like if you're right, you're right, and I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. There's no ego here. If I knew it all, I wouldn't be here on YouTube. I'd be on the Supreme Court trying to make it happen. So,
well, I do know I permit any time now. But I'll let my guest go. Until later, my friends. Peace and good night.
Peace.